on it and being on the front. Do you have any aspirations of being a political figure?
I like pussy and liquor too much. I do.
Sometimes, behind the biggest smiles and loudest laughter, the deepest rivalries are hidden. In the world of comedy, few moments have ever shined brighter than when Steve Harvey, Cedric the Entertainer, D.L. Hughley, and Bernie Mac stood together on stage as the kings of comedy. They filled arenas, made history, and brought joy to millions. But behind that royal image, D.L. Hughley now claims that not everything was as brotherly as it seemed. According to him, Steve Harvey secretly wanted Bernie Mac gone. What really happened between these men who once changed the face of black comedy forever? Stay tuned and watch this video until the end, because this story goes far deeper than jealousy or fame.
One of the interesting things, and I think about this all the time, is from the time Bernie passed till now, certainly I think society has changed, the way they digest entertainment has changed. So I think it would have been difficult. I think a lot of people would have had a hard time with some of the things that Bernie said and tended to things in his act. So
it's about friendship, pain, and how ambition can quietly destroy brotherhood. It all started in the late 1990s when the Kings of Comedy tour took off. Steve Harvey was already a well-known comedian with a hit sitcom, The Steve Harvey Show. Cedric the Entertainer was his co-star and a natural crowd favorite. Bernie Mac had been grinding for years, known for his bold, raw humor that could light up any room. D.L. Hughley was writing success from The Hughleys, his own sitcom. Together, they created a movement. Night after night, they performed to sold-out crowds across the country, showing the world the brilliance, depth, and pride of black comedy. To the fans, it was all love and laughter, but behind those curtains, according to D.L., things were tense. From the very beginning, Bernie stood out. His energy on stage was unmatched. Every time he took the mic, the audience roared like they were seeing a rock star. His jokes were real, sharp, and fearless. He wasn't trying to be Hollywood. He wasn't trying to be polished. He was being Bernie Mac, authentic, proud, and loud. And that authenticity, DL says, was exactly what made Steve Harvey uncomfortable. Steve liked order. He liked structure. He liked to be in control. He had the talk shows, the clean image, and the desire to be the leader. But Bernie didn't care about any of that. He wasn't playing the Hollywood game, and that made him dangerous to people who lived by it. According to D.L. Hughley, the competition between Steve Harvey and Bernie Mac was not just about who was funnier, it was about who would be remembered. During one interview, D.L. revealed that Bernie once told him that Steve had tried to take a movie role away from him. When Bernie landed a part in Ocean's 11, he claimed that Steve called the producers and said he would be a better fit. For Bernie, that was a betrayal. These were supposed to be brothers, not rivals. D.L. said, "That's something you just don't do." From that moment, the bond between Steve and Bernie began to crack.
The comedy, though, real quick, because I was in Chicago on the Steve Harvey show when it was kind of the reunion special with you guys.
About 4 or 5 years ago, yeah.
And you guys talked about what it meant to be on that stage at that time, really putting a stake in the ground for what not just excellent comedians look like, but what also black excellence, right, could look like. Knowing that Bernie didn't get to, experience the reunion with you guys, how do y'all still keep in touch?
Well, Steve and I talk all the time, and Sid and I talk, so we're very close and still keep in touch. Now, obviously, we miss Bernie.
To the world, it was still the kings of comedy, 4 friends, 4 legends. But behind the scenes, DL says Bernie began to see the truth. He noticed how Steve would take control of the interviews, how he became the face of the group, and how Bernie was slowly being pushed to the side. DL shared that Bernie used to sit quietly in the dressing room, frustrated, feeling like he was being left out of decisions about the tour and the money. Steve Harvey, on the other hand, was focused on building his media empire, Radio, television, hosting. He wanted to be more than a comedian. He wanted to be a brand. And that difference in goals created a gap that no one could close. Bernie was the people's champ. Every time he walked out on that stage, he destroyed it. The audience would chant his name, Bernie, Bernie, Bernie. And when he finished, nobody wanted to follow him. Not even Steve. DL said Steve used to hate going on stage after Bernie because once Bernie got done, there was nothing left.
Bernie said in the GQ article that when he got Ocean's 11, Steve had reached out to the producers that he thought he would be a better fit and tried to get the part and blah, blah, blah. And that was some shit that,
The audience had given all their energy to him. One night, according to DL, Steve even tried to have Bernie's mic cut short, saying it was throwing off the timing of the show. But DL insists the real reason was simple. Bernie was killing it too hard. Even as success grew, the tension never went away. The Kings of Comedy movie, released in 2000 and directed by Spike Lee, made history. It showed the world how powerful black comedians could be when they shared one stage, but it also exposed the clear difference between them. Bernie Mac's set became the highlight of the movie. His closing routine with the iconic "I ain't scared of you" turned him into a legend. Suddenly, Bernie was everywhere. Television, movies, interviews. He got his own show, The Bernie Mac Show, and it became a massive hit. It was funny, heartfelt, and deeply human. Bernie became a star in his own right. And according to DL, that's when Steve Harvey started to change even more. His show was already successful, but the Bernie Mac Show was pulling in stronger ratings. Bernie was now the name audiences were talking about. He had something Steve didn't have: pure connection. He was loved for being real. He didn't have to clean up his act or change who he was to be accepted. And for someone as driven and image-focused as Steve Harvey, that was hard to watch. DL said that's when Steve started to distance himself, keeping the brotherhood alive in public, but cold behind closed doors. After Bernie's passing in 2008, Steve Harvey publicly cried and said he loved Bernie like a brother. He said they never had any issues, that people were just trying to stir drama. But DL Hughley didn't see it that way. In one interview, he said something that made fans pause. He said, "It's funny how people cry."
Going to do it, and it kept my schedule. It just didn't work out, but I'm glad I didn't. I thought it got to be too messy, and I said it out loud. I think for a while, Club Shay Shay was like Wendy Williams with a weight set. Right. Like, damn, this dude. I mean, it was messy. The reason that those people went on Club Shay Shay in his first iteration before it became successful, it's because we saw what he did, and the reason I was going to go on it is because we saw what Skip did to him. I said any number of things about the way Skip sunned him.
Is that when he said, "Put your glasses back on"? Or something
that was
like that?
so horrible to me that I think a lot of people were determined to help this black man be successful because of what had happened to him. And to kind of curate all that bull and have that place that they worked so hard for you to have, so you would have your own space, be just an amalgamation and curate all the bull that is happening in our community seemed insulting to me.
Right. And we're talking about, man, some of the same people that rallied around him to make sure
Over you after you're gone, but they couldn't pick up the phone when you were alive. That line hit deep because it suggested that maybe the brotherhood people saw was just for show. Maybe the love wasn't as real as the public believed. DL Hughley's claim that Steve wanted Bernie gone doesn't mean Steve wanted harm to come to him. What DL meant was that Steve wanted him gone from the spotlight. He wanted to be the one the industry saw as the leader, the face of the Kings. And in many ways, that's how it turned out. After Bernie passed in 2008, Steve Harvey's career skyrocketed. He became the family-friendly face of entertainment, hosting Family Feud, leading his talk show, starring in movies, writing books, and eventually becoming one of the most recognizable names in television. But for many fans, there's always a question mark over how he got there. Did ambition come before brotherhood? Cedric the Entertainer, who often tried to keep peace among his friends, rarely speaks about the tension directly. He's known to avoid gossip and focuses on the good memories. In past interviews, Cedric said the group had real love and respect for each other, but he also admitted that everyone was an alpha. That means there was no clear follower, no one willing to take a back seat. And when everyone wants to lead, conflict is almost guaranteed. The Kings of Comedy tour was built on the idea of unity, but as DL said, behind the laughter there was ego and envy dressed up as love. Bernie Mac came from a place of pain and truth. He was raised in Chicago, came up through the clubs, faced rejection, racism, and hardship. Every joke he told came from real life. That's why people connected with him. He wasn't pretending. He wasn't trying to be perfect. He was trying to be honest. And sometimes, honesty makes people uncomfortable, especially in an industry built on image. Steve Harvey was the definition of polish. He always looked the part. Sharp suits, smooth words, big smiles. He understood how to move through the Hollywood system. He knew how to play politics, how to win favor with the right people. Bernie Mac didn't care about any of that. He cared about making people laugh, not making people like him. And that difference made them both powerful and incompatible. There's a moment DL described that paints the entire picture. He said that when he was offered to join the Kings of Comedy after Bernie's passing, he refused. He said, "Because you disrespected Bernie, and I know the truth." DL believed that replacing Bernie would be dishonoring what he stood for. He felt that what made Bernie special was exactly what made others want to push him out. The fact that he was too real for the game. DL said Bernie was the funniest, period. You can't beat the best, and until you humble yourself, you'll forever be king by the king. Those words cut deep, because they suggest that Bernie's legacy will always stand above those who tried to outshine him. Even years later, the debate continues. Was DL Hughley telling the truth, or was he stirring old wounds? Some fans think DL is being messy, trying to bring back past pain for attention. Others believe he's simply defending a man who can't defend himself anymore. One thing is certain. Bernie Mac's name still means something. He's still loved, still quoted, still celebrated, and even in death, his legacy shines brighter than ever. When you think about it, what DL said isn't just about Steve Harvey or Bernie Mac. It's about what fame does to people. When success becomes the goal, friendship often becomes a casualty. It's about how ambition can cloud loyalty, how pride can silence love. DL once said, "We were brothers, but sometimes brothers fight."
Bernie Mac's story didn't end when his life did. His name still carries power, his laughter still fills rooms, and his truth still echoes every time someone picks up a mic and says what others are too afraid to. That's why this story continues to matter, because it's not just about old wounds or celebrity rumors. It's about the price of authenticity, the loneliness of honesty, and what happens when a man refuses to bend for fame. DL Hughley's words hit a nerve not because they expose gossip, but because they remind us that even legends can be misunderstood, and that sometimes the realest ones are the ones the world doesn't protect. Steve Harvey's rise to dominance after Bernie's passing shows how the industry rewards control and presentation. Steve became a global figure, hosting Family Feud, Steve Harvey Morning Show, Little Big Shots, and countless other platforms. He became a household name, known for advice, wisdom, and his ability to motivate others. But there's always been that question in the background. What happened between him and Bernie? Why do people still whisper about that tension after all these years? DL Hughley's claims have reopened that curiosity, not because people want to hate Steve, but because people want the truth. Fans want to understand how something that looked like a brotherhood turned into quiet distance and unspoken pain. Cedric the Entertainer has often said that people misunderstand the bond between them. He insists that what they created together was bigger than any individual disagreement, and that no amount of fame or jealousy could erase that history. Cedric's words feel calm, balanced, and wise. He represents the middle ground, the peacekeeper, the one who loved both Bernie and Steve. But even Cedric has admitted that there was tension, that all of them were alpha males, each trying to prove they were the best. In comedy, ego is unavoidable. Every performer wants to be the one who gets the biggest laugh, the loudest cheer, the longest standing ovation. But the problem begins when ego replaces respect. And that's where DL says things went wrong. DL Hughley has always been outspoken. He doesn't filter his opinions, and that's both his gift and his curse. When he talks about Bernie Mac, you can feel the admiration in his tone. You can sense that he believed Bernie was something sacred, someone who deserved better from the industry and from his peers. In DL's eyes, Bernie wasn't just a comedian. He was the embodiment of truth. He told jokes that came from struggle, jokes that reflected pain and survival. And according to DL, that's why Hollywood didn't protect him. He wasn't built to play the game, and that made him expendable in a system that rewards performance over honesty. There's something haunting about the way DL described Bernie's final years. He said Bernie felt isolated, that he was tired, not just physically, but emotionally. He was tired of politics, tired of pretending, tired of smiling through disrespect. But even then, Bernie kept performing. He never stopped making people laugh, because to him, laughter was more than a job. It was his way of healing. Even when his health began to fail, he kept pushing forward. And when he passed away in 2008, the world didn't just lose a comedian, it lost one of the last voices of pure comedy. Steve Harvey's public grief was real in its own way. He cried in interviews, talked about missing Bernie, and shared memories of their early days. But DL's words made people question the timing of that emotion. Why did all the love come after Bernie was gone? Why didn't that love show up when Bernie was still alive, sitting alone in his dressing room, feeling like an outsider? That's the question that lingers in the minds of fans. It's not about blame, it's about regret. Because once someone is gone, there are no second chances to make things right. Bernie Mac's influence can still be seen in every comedian who dares to be honest on stage. His confidence, his grit, his refusal to tone it down, all of that changed the culture. He made it okay for comedians to be themselves. When he said, "I ain't scared of you," it wasn't just a punchline, it was a declaration. He wasn't scared of the industry, of judgment, or of losing fans. He was scared of being fake. And that's why years later, people still quote him, still study his sets, still feel connected to his energy. Bernie represented truth in its rawest form. DL Hughley's version of the story gives Bernie something he might never have gotten in life: vindication. It paints him as the real king, the one who didn't need to be crowned because he already had the people. The way DL tells it, Bernie's legacy wasn't built on image, but on impact. And that's something no fame or marketing can replace. When DL said Bernie was the funniest, period, he wasn't exaggerating. Every night Bernie closed the show for a reason. No one wanted to follow him because he left nothing on the table. He gave everything he had every time. That's what made him a legend. As for Steve Harvey, his success continues, and in many ways he earned it. His work ethic is unmatched, his charisma undeniable. But DL's comments remind people that success often comes with stories we never hear. The question is not whether Steve was jealous or not. The question is whether his ambition came at a cost. Whether in chasing greatness, he forgot the brotherhood that helped him rise. Maybe DL is wrong, maybe he's right, but what matters most is that people are still talking about Bernie, still remembering him, still giving him the respect he deserved. Cedric the Entertainer once said that Bernie had a spirit that couldn't be copied. You could try to imitate his jokes, his delivery, even his attitude, but you'd never capture his heart. That's because Bernie's comedy came from who he was, not what he wanted to be. And that's something no one can duplicate. It's what makes his legacy timeless. In the end, DL Hughley's statement that Steve Harvey wanted Bernie Mac gone isn't just a claim. It's a reflection of something deeper in entertainment and in life. It's about how competition can quietly eat away at love, how pride can silence brotherhood, how success can divide people who once dreamed together. The Kings of Comedy were more than a tour. They were a cultural movement, a symbol of unity and excellence. But beneath that crown, there were cracks, and those cracks tell a story that's still being felt today. Bernie Mac's name continues to carry weight because of what he stood for: truth, courage, and humor that came from the soul. He showed that being real is more powerful than being popular, and even though he's gone, he remains the heart of the Kings of Comedy. D.L. Hughley's words, whether seen as truth or controversy, have reignited appreciation for that heart. Because legends like Bernie don't fade. They live on, in every laugh, every stage, every moment where someone dares to be unapologetically themselves. So as you reach the end of this story, remember this. It's not just about who said what or who felt what. It's about how easily ambition can turn brothers into rivals, and how hard it is to heal what's broken once fame gets in the way. D.L. Hughley's truth may not be everyone's truth, but it forced the world to look back and ask, what really happened? Maybe we'll never know every detail, but we know this: Bernie Mac was loved by the people, and love like that never dies. The Kings of Comedy will always be remembered for their laughter, their legacy, and their influence. But behind the laughter was a lesson, a reminder that success means nothing without sincerity, and fame means nothing without loyalty. Bernie Mac's legacy proves that being real will always outlast being popular. He may have left this world too soon, but his spirit remains, louder than ever. And maybe, just maybe, that's what makes him the truest king of them all.
DL is the greatest. There's no DL slander gets tolerated. They came to me. I was supposed to be the fourth king. I got the offer. Then what happened? But I turned it down. Why? Because you shit on Bernie, and I know the truth. You think I'm gonna let you shit on Bernie and then come get me? I'm the next king? Fuck you. Why? Because the whole time Bernie was here, you was acting like you was funnier than him. The reason you was supposed to go last is because it was your tour. Not it was gonna be called the Kings of Comedy, it was Steve's tour. These are the guys opening for him. That's why it was such a big deal. But you couldn't do it, because you can't beat the best. And until you humble yourself, you will forever be kinged by the king. You stop it. That man was funnier than all of y'all, and y'all thought y'all had one over on him. You thought he was black and ugly, and you were good looking, and he couldn't make it, because you did. And that ain't the way comedy works. The king is the funniest.
Now listen, what I'm about to share with you isn't just another comedy story, and it's not some made-up internet rumor either. This one comes straight from Katt Williams himself. And when Katt speaks, people listen. Because love him or hate him, Katt doesn't sugarcoat, he doesn't filter, and he doesn't play favorites. So if you think you know the full story about the tension between Steve Harvey and Bernie Mac, you might want to stay right here, because by the end of this video, your entire perspective on the Kings of Comedy might change forever. When people talk about the Kings of Comedy, they think of a golden era. 4 legends, 4 different styles, 1 stage, and a movement that changed comedy forever. You had Steve Harvey, the host with the charm and the confidence, D.L. Hughley, the sharp, quick-witted political voice, Cedric the entertainer, smooth, cool, and hilarious, and of course, Bernie Mac, the raw truth teller, the man who didn't care what anybody thought. Together, they became a symbol of unity and excellence in black comedy. But behind the laughs, behind the sold-out arenas and roaring applause, there was tension, real tension, the kind that fame and ego can't hide forever. Now, Katt Williams recently spoke about what really went down, and what he said shocked a lot of people. He said he was offered to be the 4th king of comedy after Bernie Mac passed. Just imagine that for a second, Katt Williams being part of that lineup. But Katt didn't take it, and the reason why? Because, in his words, they disrespected Bernie Mac. He said he wasn't going to step into a position that was built on dishonor. He wasn't going to be crowned in a kingdom where the true king had been mistreated. Katt said it plain. He said, "They came to me, they offered me the spot, but I turned it down. Why? Because you disrespected Bernie, and I know the truth." You could hear the pride and pain in his voice. Katt wasn't trying to stir drama, he was standing on loyalty. He made it clear that during Bernie's lifetime, certain people acted like they were funnier, more important, and more deserving. But the truth, as Katt told it, is that nobody could touch Bernie on stage. Stay with me here, because what comes next really opens your eyes. Katt said the reason Steve Harvey always went last on the Kings of Comedy tour wasn't because he was the funniest. He said it was because the tour belonged to Steve. That's right. According to Katt, it was Steve Harvey's tour. It was going to be called the King's Tour. And those other comedians, D.L. Hughley, Cedric the Entertainer, and Bernie Mac, were technically opening acts on Steve's platform. So of course, Steve got to close the show. But Katt said when Bernie hit that stage, everything changed. And you know what? He wasn't lying. Anyone who's ever watched Bernie Mac perform knows that when Bernie walked out, the whole room belonged to him. He didn't have to dress it up or make it fancy. His timing, his presence, his fearlessness, it was something you can't teach. Katt said that Bernie didn't need a crown because he already was the king. The audience crowned him every night, and that's something no tour structure, no closing slot, no hierarchy could change. But here's where it gets deep. Katt said that some of the other comedians looked at Bernie and saw someone they could underestimate. They thought because he wasn't the most polished, because he was dark-skinned, because he didn't fit that Hollywood image, that he couldn't make it as big as them. But that's where they were wrong, because comedy doesn't care about how you look. Comedy cares about connection, truth, and guts. And Bernie Mac had all of that in ways that nobody else did. And that's what made Katt Williams speak up. He wasn't afraid to call it what it was: jealousy, ego, and competition. He said it wasn't about who had more fame or more money. It was about who was the funniest. And Bernie was the funniest, period. That's why, no matter what order he went in, Bernie stole the show. If he went first, he still had the crowd in tears. If he went last, people left the arena talking about him. The people knew who the real king was, and that's something nobody could deny. Now let's pause for a second, because here's your first big hook. If you think the story is about old beef or old rumors, think again. This is about how the entertainment industry really works. This is about what happens when real talent meets power, politics, and pride. Because what Katt Williams exposed isn't just about comedy. It's about truth, loyalty, and the cost of standing your ground. So don't go anywhere, because the deeper we go into this story, the more it makes sense why Katt turned that offer down and why the name Bernie Mac still holds so much weight today. Back in the early 2000s, the original Kings of Comedy was more than just a show. It was a cultural shift. Steve Harvey hosted it, Cedric brought the style, DL brought the intellect, and Bernie brought the fire. That combination made magic. But after the spotlight faded, Bernie's relationship with Steve reportedly changed. Some say it was about competition, others say it was deeper, maybe about respect. Bernie was known for saying exactly what he felt, even if it made people uncomfortable. That's what made him powerful, but it's also what made him a threat. When Katt Williams said Steve Harvey acted like he was funnier than Bernie, he wasn't just talking about stage time. He was talking about energy, about how some people move when they start believing their own hype. He said Steve had the tour, the spotlight, the structure, but Bernie had the soul, and that's something you can't fake. He said it's one thing to host a show, but another thing entirely to move a crowd with pure authenticity. Now imagine being Katt Williams, young, rising, watching all this play out. The industry offers you the crown, the chance to stand where Bernie once stood, but deep down, you know it's not right. You know the person they pushed out was the one who carried the real weight. Katt said no, because in his eyes, if you disrespect the foundation, the whole house is unstable. That's real talk. And that's where he hit a nerve. He said, "You think I'm going to join you after you disrespected Bernie? No, because the whole time Bernie was here, you acted like you were funnier than him." That right there, that's the kind of loyalty and courage we rarely see in Hollywood. Katt wasn't afraid of missing out. He wasn't afraid of losing a bag. He stood by principle. But you know what else he said? He said Steve Harvey couldn't beat Bernie because you can't beat the best. That line hit like a punch. He said until Steve learned humility, he'll always be kinged by the real king, Bernie Mac. That's deep, because Katt wasn't saying this with hate. He wasn't mocking Steve. He was just laying the truth bare, that in comedy, the audience decides. You can't buy that, you can't market it, and you can't fake it. Now this part might shock you, but Katt went further. He said that after Bernie passed away, Steve Harvey started acting like Bernie just wanted to be a movie star, like he had outgrown comedy. Katt wasn't having it. He said, "Stop it. That man was funnier than all of y'all." You could feel the passion in his voice. He wasn't just defending a legacy, he was protecting the truth. Because the truth is, Bernie didn't want Hollywood fame as an escape, he wanted it as expansion. He wanted to take his art higher, not leave it behind. Bernie worked his way up from Chicago's roughest stages to the biggest arenas in the country. He didn't have industry connections or powerful agents. What he had was raw talent and discipline. Every joke came from real life, from poverty, from pain, from family. He told stories that hit home, and that's why fans loved him so deeply. You can't manufacture that. You can't replace that. And that's why even years after his death, his name still sparks emotion. Katt said y'all thought you had one over on him. You thought because he looked better or had a certain style, you could outshine him. But comedy doesn't work that way. The funniest person always wins, no matter what. The stage is the great equalizer. That's what Bernie proved, and that's what Katt was reminding everyone of. The real king is crowned by laughter, not by contracts. Now, if you're still watching right now, and I hope you are, you can feel it too. This isn't just another story about comedians arguing. This is about integrity. It's about knowing when to say no, even when the whole world is saying yes. It's about respecting the people who built the stage you stand on. Bernie Mack, Steve Harvey, D.L. Hughley, Cedric the Entertainer, and yes, Katt Williams, they're all part of the same history. But some names shine because of what they did, while other names shine because of how they stood. Bernie Mac stood for truth. Katt Williams stood for loyalty. And that's what keeps both of their names alive. So before you click away, remember this. The crown doesn't make the king. The people do. And when it comes to comedy, there's one name that still rules in people's hearts. Bernie Mac. He didn't need a throne. He didn't need a title. He earned his respect the hard way, and no one can ever take that away from him. And as for Katt Williams, he showed the world that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away, because standing with the truth will always outshine standing with the crowd. So if you want to understand comedy, loyalty, and legacy, remember this story, because behind every laugh, there's a lesson, and behind every legend, there's someone who made sure the truth didn't die with them. And that's exactly what Katt Williams did.